Good night and welcome to Family Fest Barbados 2026. This is our Children's Week. As you heard in our song, in our theme song, Family Fest is dedicated to bringing health, hope, healing, and happiness across the island. And of course, we know that healthy families will lead to a healthy society, and that will improve our nation. Healthy communities, healthy society, healthy nation, and increased productivity. So much good can come out of good families. Tonight, we're going to have a wonderful discussion all about dual parenting versus single parent homes. Are there advantages? Are there disadvantages to having one or both parents? What are the benefits for children? And these are just some of the things that you can look forward to us fleshing out here on our discussion tonight. I am your moderator for this evening, Dr. Renee Boyce. It is my pleasure to be with you again. Looking forward to a wonderful time with you. And on our panel, we have Sinclair Brown. Good evening, Sinclair.
Good evening. Blessings in the name of Jesus. I'm happy to be here. And I pray we have a wonderful time this evening.
Yes, you would have seen on your posters that there are some other persons who are to be on our panel. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we do have to go ahead without them, but they'll join us later. And that in no way will make a difference to the level of discussion that we will have. So first of all, Sinclair, tell
Yes,
me
please.
about Sinclair. Who is Sinclair Brown? What does he do? What's your claim to fame?
My claim to fame is Jesus, totally, fully. And I am a counselor, I'm a therapist, I'm a minister, I'm a husband for 23 years. I have three sons, and I'm a grandfather. So yes, that my cup is full. And I'm looking forward to more of doing, what God would lead me to do as far as family and relationships are concerned.
Okay, when we're talking today about single parent versus dual parent home. So let me ask you straight off the bat, did you grow up in a single parent home or dual parent home?
Definitely a single parent home. And this is not a single parent where there's like I'm shared between two parents. This is single parent, one parent, full stop.
Okay,
And
and
yeah,
that was your
no, the thing about my father left Barbados when I was 3 years old. He went to live to
right. So it
Canada.
was your mom. You grew up with your mom.
Yes, please. Yeah. Grew up with my
Okay.
mom, grandmother, and sister. So being in a home predominantly with women. And yes, so that was my experience of in a single parent home. So yeah, some people say single parent, but sometimes it's still the assistance of the parent, which I understand. But my particular testimony is single parent, full stop.
Okay, I
No
do
no
remember I
stepfather, no anything.
no nothing. It was just mom, granny, and anybody else who would
And
chip
my
in and
sister,
help.
yeah. Yes,
Yes.
please.
So I do remember like when my children would be doing homework projects and so on for social studies, one of the things that I saw repeated in primary and secondary school would be the definition of family. So quickly,
Mhm.
tell us the different types of families that we have so that our audience can get an understanding of family structure.
Well, you did throw me on there because I was looking for my notes. I can't find them, but no, that's why I changed my computer. But I'm the technical terms I may not have them correctly. But we do have the parents where they're raised, where both parents are not there, they're raised by other parents, where you're talking about the grandmother, aunts, or another person like that. Then there's the family structure, which is the traditional structure of mother and father raising the children. Then there's where the mother is raising the children, and then where the father is the children. So those are the four categories predominantly that when we categorize um, the raising of the children, those are the ones that we normally talk about when discussing family structures.
Yeah, and then we also have to think about those children who would have been adopted
Yes,
into
please. Mm.
homes as well.
Yes, please.
That's another category of children who really do require some special assistance depending on the family in which they
Mhm.
find themselves. So, in your experience, think back through the years as a counselor, trained therapist. Is there any difference between the children you see who are troubled, whether they come from single parent homes mainly or dual parent homes?
Okay, when we say trouble, that is very broad,
Mm,
but
yeah.
yes, you cannot look at a troubled child and say, okay, this is one is raised by mother, father, or both parents. Because
Hmm.
you can have both parents, but if the environment is environment where it is toxic or unhealthy for the child, which would have the child, having several different issues. And this is one of the reasons the therapist we do the ACE test, ACE, yeah, test. So the whole thing of testing children to find out what was their environment growing up so that we can see if they have challenges, what could be those challenges. Because there's a very correlation between early childhood development and issues and what happens as you grow up and the issues and challenges you can have. So to say based on who's in the home compared to the type of culture or the environment of the home, I think that is more impactful, yeah, to the child than if it is a male, female, or both. I say you have both parents there, but both parents can be unhealthy in raising that child and cause a lot of trauma to the child.
Okay, so what I'm getting you saying that it's not necessarily the fact that the home has both parents, but really it's in the environment of the home that seems to have the greater impact on of
Yes.
the output of the child.
Yes, please. And
Okay,
therefore
and I
then,
agree with
mhm,
you.
mhm. Right, because then because when you say trouble, as I says a broad term.
Hmm.
However, every to then slice and say, okay, look and see children are raised by mothers alone, fathers alone, and two parents, and you just frame it a little bit more where it's okay, what is healthy or what is semi-healthy, and see where we go from there. Then you begin to see the difference of both parents, mother, father, and then you start to see some data showing up in those type of information.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what the research could possibly show. When
Mhm,
we look at research, we have to look at things like outcomes in order to
mhm,
discuss properly what the data would be saying. So, in
mhm,
terms of educational attainment, dropping out of school versus continuing on to tertiary education, for example,
mhm.
or early pregnancy, teenage pregnancy,
Yes, please.
what are the data saying with
Yes,
respect
please.
to single parent homes and
Mhm.
dual parent homes and those
Right.
children?
Yes, please. You definitely see the data start to pop up significant when I said where fathers are not there. When the father's not there, you definitely see the dropouts, the early pregnancies, the drugs, challenges in support systems. You see predominantly that the missing of the male in the space there, you then see these figures start to go up as far as delinquencies, sicknesses, even challenging with the immune system, sicknesses and so forth. So therefore, I try to get men to understand that they are very important when it comes to children and the raising of those children and being impactful in the children's lives. So, many times we talk about where women are providers, men are nurturers. And while I understand that as a therapist, I personally have a challenge with those statements.
Okay. So, what's your challenge? It's not enough for you to say, I have a challenge with that statement and not tell us what your challenge with that statement is.
I do believe that because they asked, okay, what is the supporting structure for these statements? And let's say when men have to raise children by themselves, okay, and many times we don't see that data um as often. We don't see that data when men raise children by themselves, and we see the figures drop as far as delinquency, early pregnancies, and all those things, where he's just a man raising a child by himself. So is it that the provider has a better capacity to nurture more than the mother? What is going on? I do believe that men are very good nurturers. I just think that we have not been taught or given the understanding of what nurturing is or what nurturing can look like. And I think we fall very much into a culture that says this is what you bring to the table as men, which is provision, and therefore we never investigate our nurturing capacity,
The
like
nurturing side.
the
Yeah.
nurturing side.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
because of unfortunately we've put nurturing as feminine for some unknown reason. But as when I'm training when I'm training several of my people that I do mentorship with, and they would say the men, and I show them where they can learn how to be nurturers because we have a languaging, where it says the child is mine from many females. And I say to the guys, and I just try to get them engaged and women engaged in the conversation. And I would use a coy scenario. Most of you've heard it already. I say if there's a drink machine and the drink machine is there, and you put money in the drink machine, who does the drink belong to, the machine or the person putting the money? Right? Just to give that. And then I add to that where we talk about the DNA evidence that the child has 99.9% of the male's DNA. No, once I have that bedrock there, then I go on to speak about the fact of women carrying this child for roughly 10 months. Yeah, because 4 weeks in a month. In 9 months, depending on where you describe it, 10 months. After she's given birth to this child, she's basically spawning between life and death to give birth to this child. Before she even recovers, there is a child, trying to lactate, to latch on to the breast. The lady has not even been given a chance to recover. And therefore, my thing on that is the 10 months plus the time of weaning that child has been the more than sacrificial towards giving us a child. After the child is lactate, now it's the man's turn. I believe to handing over that child, like, no, it's your time, my brother. You need to come in here and deal with this child, which is different to the man being the assistant on the outside. So the woman's pregnant, she has the child, she births the child, she lactates, she weans the child, and then for 20 something years, she's still the predominant caretaker, which to me is ludicrous.
Well, I tend to differ with you just a little bit, and we're going to
Oh,
have a
nice. Oh, nice. I
conversation
love it.
with, yes, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Sergeant Fabian Sergeant, who
Mhm,
has been able to join us. So we'll chat with you shortly, Fabian.
mhm,
But your statement just now, Sinclair, about the lady being pregnant, and then there's that period of lactation, which only the mother can do.
mhm,
I say to people when I see them in clinic, when I'm teaching students, the only thing that the father cannot do is breastfeed. That is
mhm,
the only thing that he cannot do, which means even during that period of lactation, he's still able to change diapers, hold the child whilst the mother gets an opportunity to sleep, wash dishes, clean house, etc., etc. So
mhm,
his input into the rearing of that child is still possible during that initial phase where the child is now here for the first time and so on. That's
mhm,
the only thing he cannot do is breastfeed.
mhm.
And
I
even
totally agree.
then, you can feed in a bottle, breast milk in a bottle, because
Totally
breast is
agree.
best.
Totally
Breast is
agree.
best. So
Mhm.
before we continue our conversation, Sinclair, let's welcome Fabian. Good evening, Fabian. Welcome.
Good evening, good evening. I apologize for joining in this way,
That's okay. It shows your
just
level of
just
commitment to
just
this
yeah,
cause.
man. Had an unforeseen circumstance that prevented me from being in a more comfortable setting.
Well, you
Yeah.
know what we say here in Barbados, as soon as you land, you come ashore. So we are going to throw you into the deep end. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between the dual parent home and the single parent home and finances and the impact on that child. What do you think happens to children in those circumstances?
So I guess it boils down to the environment that is created for that child. I know we try to put the two-parent household versus the single-parent household, but you could have a two-parent household that's extremely toxic and it does not work well for that child's emotional stability. It does not work well for the socialization of that child. It actually works against sometimes the whole attachment that that child may develop throughout its lifetime. However, it can also work in the opposite way, where you can have a two-parent household where that child grows with dual value systems. Research shows that a lot of these children they do better in their academic environment. They most of the time, again, this is within the environment. This is within an environment that is emotionally regulated. children are naturally more emotionally, I guess, individually regulated. They can connect to their peers. They know how to manage relationships. They're better in terms of decision making, and generally, holistically, their entire social well-being is better. But again, it boils down to the environment. In a single parent household, I mean, you have single parent households where the social environment, whether it's mother or father, can either go toxic or can be very emotionally regulated, where a similar pattern can happen. But what I will tell you is that oftentimes, children, there is a void. There is a void because, I mean, we are engineered to have both of our parents. And I know many individuals who would have raised in a single parent mother household. At some point, there are many of them who speak unless there is another, let's say, male who is very present and active in their life. If they don't have a male presence, a lot of them feel a void in their adulthood, and vice versa. If there's a father who raises a child in the absence of the mother, and there's no strong female figure present, that child also feels a void. So both, again, I wouldn't, while research speaks to, a two-parent household, in many instances being a better household, I think the focus should be on environment, because we also have to consider co-parenting. Parents who live apart, whether through divorce or otherwise, and that is quite common in our environment. And it boils down to the environment that both of those parents also create for the child, who determines, their behavior, their attitude, and how they respond to their emotions.
So it's very interesting that you have said the same thing that Sinclair said in the beginning, where it's more the environment versus the number of parents in a household. So whilst that is said, what do the statistics said? So I took a look. I took a look at the prison population, for example, and it showed that 75% of the incarcerated youth and young adults come from single parent homes and typically single mother homes. And
Yeah,
that 46% of the adult offenders were raised in single parent homes. And
correct.
there are so many different factors that would impact this particular statistic. So we are not knocking single parent homes. There's so many reasons why there are single parent homes, because you could have started out with a dual parent home and then one parent dies, or then there could have been divorce or neglect.
Can I say something?
Sure,
I
go ahead.
think I think a lot of the challenge usually comes through the adolescent phase. Um, for especially for boys, because those statistics that you're referring to are male statistics, right?
Male. Mhm.
All right, correct. And for adolescent boys, as they go through that phase and they're trying to understand who they are, they're trying to, make sense of the world around them. They're trying to, as we would say, they try to please the friends. Their friends become the most influential people in their lives. If they do not have strong social support, it is a lot for one parent to have to deal with, especially a mother, because during those adolescent phases, fathers, men, have a lot more influence in the lives of boys, of males during that phase. So I'm not surprised, that you can have such a statistic. I think in order for us to really counteract that, this is where the presence of the community, the village that we saw so much speak about, and the village is not the immediate village. The village are those individuals who have influence on that child's life. It could be from the church, the football group, it could be a neighbor, or uncle, and this is where men generally have to step in and fill that void that is there, because sometimes, a single parent, for whatever reason, they're doing the best that they can. And trust me, if they have two, three, or even four multiple children, it makes the
Six.
job even more challenging, especially when
Yes.
it comes to finances. And you know that we as a people, when you got money in your pocket, you can't function. So a
Cannot.
mother can want the 2 or 3 children, you know, baggage in she ears and the rent go up here, food go by, and she trying to make $1.50, you know. Then the emotions are all over the place and it makes that job much difficult. So it's important that we understand the holistic picture.
Yeah, and as much as we want to, as parents, to try to shield our children from the challenges that we are experiencing, it's not easy, especially when there's challenge after challenge after challenge. Sinclair, I remember at the beginning you had mentioned that you had an entirely single parent home, female single parent home. It was just your mom, your granny was there as well, and a sister. So
Mhm.
this male influence that Fabian is talking about, being part of the community that helps to build up the male,
Mhm.
you didn't have that.
Mhm.
What do you think it was that has made you into the successful gentleman that you are now, having come from an entirely female single parent home? Well, it can't be half females, have to be
Mhm.
all female.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, not to sound cliche, this was definitely God. Um, for instance, although I was raised in a single parent home, I don't champion it, because I understand the absence of not having a father around. And
Yes.
so therefore being on the block, because I used to be on the block, and that is where fathering took place. Okay. Because many people don't understand. We try to find these programs for the block, but the block is literally a fathering system. Yeah, because
Mm,
on there you get the male presence. That way, tell people if you look on the block, there's order. You might see disorder in the society, but on the block itself, there's order. On the block is clean. You don't see a dirty block. You know what I'm saying? The guys come over there to sweep the block. They can't spit on the ground. You can't throw trash on the ground. You know what I mean? They paint the rocks, like better painting rocks. Think
yes.
about this.
Yes. Yes.
They may have gardens on
Decorating.
there. Honestly.
Yes.
So you don't come out there and you can't be taking it. So there's order. So what makes the block is fathering. And so the block was part of my fathering process because the absence of the male, you will look for a male. Yeah. And so therefore, as Fabian was saying, one of the things I do tell mothers that find themselves in that single parenting role is that you find other men, be the football coach, the basketball coach, the chess coach, the whoever, you look for strong men and you stick your child. Isn't that you want your child to be in the NBA or play at the World Cup? You're just using the environment of the testosterone and the male leader to bring that fathering into the space. And the more men you have to be used as fathering, then you could even use, as I said with Fabian, let's say if Fabian is leading a space with males, then I could say, well, Fabian, my son, he's struggling with this. Can you speak to him about that? Or my daughter is struggling with this. And without even each other knowing, you're using fathers, you're using men to father the child. So even if you have a two-parent home that is healthy, if you think about it, more often when they have two parents, they do, generally speaking, try to get their children involved in other activities. And they also speak to those coaches about the child. So those coaches and other people of influence parent the child. So I say, even for those women that have no man around, you use the men and you use the cultures, you use the other systems that are there for healthy men to also to be part of the fathering process. So my
Yeah.
my particular process was definitely a God process because coming from the area, being on the block, but having to learn what fathering, husbanding, all those things was definitely a Holy Spirit episode for me.
So one of the challenges that persons have in the single parent home, and we'll say that the majority of the single parent homes are run by mothers. And in
Mhm.
these single parent homes, one of the challenges, as I mentioned just now, is finances. And both you
Mhm.
and
Fabian.
Fabian
Mhm.
mentioned extracurricular activities and the involvement in all of these different things. But let's picture the single mother who has 6 children. That's not uncommon in our society, 4 to 6 children,
Mhm.
various ages. And then you have one that has a school project that's due and they need Bristol board and crayons. And then somebody else has to pay for this. And then somebody else has to pay for that. Can you think of anything that you would say to such a mother? Because there could be somebody watching right now who is
Mhm.
saying that, but how you telling me to put my children in all of these things? How am I going to get that done? Any suggestions you have from your years of experience?
Obviously that is difficult. It's a very difficult situation. The reason being is that logistics is a thing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you live and where these activities are occurring, you is going to have a challenge. So even outside of six children, you're looking at spaces, you're looking at the dynamic of logistic joining those things. But there have been people that have been able to constructively do things like this. When we speak about people like Ben Carson, who American neurosurgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about his mother. He has a book on it where his mother, while they were poor, while he gave a lot of trouble, as he spoke in his book, and he became one of the top surgeons in the world as a
Yeah,
black
gifted
man.
hands.
Gifted hands, there you go. That was the movie, the books. But if you
Mm-hmm.
listen to him explain his mother could not read,
Yes.
right? But however, she made him do assignments. She made him do reports. She would correct those reports. Only after he got to be adult, he recognized, she couldn't tell what. But she was intelligent. While she was not academic, she was intelligent enough to build a structure. For those persons, and yes, it's going to be difficult if this is not your natural nature. Structure is what children need. You know what I mean? You may not be able to take them to places, but the structure is necessary. So if you have structure, you could provide structure for those children. If you don't have personal structure, then you find people that assist you with structure for the children because you may not be able to buy the football boots. But I can tell you this, that people who are intentional, they're people, finds a way to help you along the way. But even outside of that, structure to me is the most important thing. If those resources are not available, you may not be able to do the things, but having those six children, providing structure, spending one-on-one time, which it may be 10 minutes, because you can't give everybody 2 hours, but 10 minutes reading with this child, 10 minutes with this child, and juggling as best as you could until they get into a position that they're, walking their own, but you are there to provide structure until they can fly.
Right. So, Fabian, do you think that as a church we might have failed these single parent homes? Have we done our duty as the church to be active, to be present in these children's lives, those children who come from single parent homes?
Okay, so there's a number of things, and I will answer that question last. Let me address the something a little earlier. In terms of community-based activities, sports programs, culture programs, I can tell you that across Barbados, and I'm trying to keep it to a very local grassroots level that the average person in Barbados can definitely connect with. I can tell you that I know that there are a number of government departments that make sure they decentralize programs, especially for this type of purpose, and programs that are free. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that there's no need for, let's say, a mother or a parent with six children having to struggle to find extracurricular activities. I know of the youth development program that has sporting programs from football, netball, hockey,
Youth
across
achieving
Barbados,
results. Mm-hmm.
free you for achieving results. You have the culture programs. I know the community development does some stuff. I know there are a number of other organizations who chip in to ensure that children across Barbados are engaged in a very positive way using sports culture, etc. So sometimes it is not the availability, it is the attitude towards the accessing these services or these sports or activities. Okay. I can tell you as a parent, my children are involved in them as well. So I know communities, nobody are gonna catch the bus to go to the football field. The football field is walking distance. Is if you want to go or not, or if the parent is motivated enough to motivate the child to get up and say, look, go along and play cricket, go along and play football. I know we give the church some lashes, and this is no to your question. And I do think that churches can do a lot more. The church is the largest collective body on the island. And I always say that, there's always room for improvement. And I think that churches need to connect a lot more at the community level. I would have done sessions of churches who wanted to work in the community, but for some reason they lack the skill set. They did not know how to engage, their churches and communities who have not done any outreach in extended periods of time. And it is not that difficult because churches have resources, they have centers, they have buildings, that they can host from homework programs, we work back down the counseling. And they always say things like having safe spaces for men and boys and even mothers, sometimes who want to offload. The church may have a counselor or two who willing to volunteer sometime. We know how the give back program nationally. I think we have the resources, but I don't think that we utilize them enough. And again, I
I
think it
agree.
boils down to mindset. I always say, I always tell my son, if you start the race thinking that you can lose, you lost before you even start. There are
Yes,
churches with the mindset that we can't get it done. Instead of getting up and starting and saying, let me get this do, you know. And I do understand the violence sometimes in some communities. I understand what social media pushes. But at the same time, if you are community minded or community spirited, you must find somebody. Those communities have gatekeepers. And if you engage any community across Barbados, you find the gatekeeper, you say, like, as a church run down the road and they would like to start a homework program, a little football program, or like to talk to the young people some more. They are accepting. They will help you to get into those communities. So I really think that we need to put a lot more effort. The resources are there, but we need to really shift our mindset if you're supposed to help single parents. And this is just getting back to the real point in terms of parents having positive stuff, utilizing the village concept, for raising their children.
Just want
yes.
to
Two
jump in there.
things. Sure,
Sorry, let
go
me just
ahead.
jump
You
in,
go ahead.
Fabian. Because I just joined on with there. Because when I was saying about the parents, and Fabian articulated better than I did. But as I said, it is the attitude. Even okay. Let me put it all the way back when we talked about two parents together. Yeah, two parents. It's the attitude, right? The culture of
Agree.
that child with both parents is the attitude of both parents. Is the attitude of one parent. It is the space of if that woman has 6 children, if she has the person, if she has the intentionality to do it, it can be done. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard, but having one child is hard. But the thing about it, resources exist in Barbados. They're numerous, right? There is Dean Squires. He's been doing basketball for young men for
Yes.
eons. You know what I'm saying to you?
Props to
And
Dean.
props to Dean. You know what I mean? And he doing the road tests and stuff. But and Fabian mentioned something called gatekeepers. And you cannot, as much as the church would like to, the idea, and Fabian, and put you on this, you call the word gatekeepers, be it gatekeepers in community, gatekeepers in a community, whatever it is a mindset. Because Fabian, you've been doing your job because of a mindset. You could go and you could scream to everybody else. You could try to write a protocol. Dean have been trying for years, but Dean is a one-man show. But look how many men over the last 20 plus years have been a part of Dean Squares. Right? Does he have other people behind him? Yes. I'm not saying that. But the mindset to go and get it done. And sometimes you have to find that person. You know what I mean? And that person may have more of an impact. And yes, some people go into church, you may not have the capacity. Because you know Fabian very much, and I'm sure you know this, Miss Boyce also. There's nothing worse than promising a child that you'll be there and don't show up. I
And
think
don't
that
show
is
up.
worse than not being there at all. Right? And I think that
So
having those people, go tell me.
yeah, there's a point I want to make earlier too, right? We
Mm,
talk about single parent households.
mm.
And I think we got to be very careful even with this term single parent.
Yeah, I
Because
personally have
I
a challenge
know
too.
I know of situations where their parents they are co-parenting. The two parents
Mhm.
live in different households. But the mother says she's a single parent. And I know this is quite common. Not only that, we have to also be conscious of those fathers who may be absent from homes,
But very
not on
present with
purpose.
child.
Not on
Mhm.
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
Not on
Yes.
purpose.
Yes.
We
Agreed.
talking about mindset. We also have to talk about the hurt and pain and trauma that a lot of parents go through and they went through, and those traumas manifest in adulthood, and how they connect or disconnect with their child father or child mother, you know, has a lot to do with them. And there are some people, there are some parents, who refuses to engage that other parent for whatever reason. I know men
Mm.
who get money deliver, force money get sent back. The mother ain't want the money. I don't speak about men because I deal with men, but I know sometimes this may be on the other side. So I don't want this scene to be a one-sided type of situation. I speak about that because that's my experience based on the population that I work with. So I don't want women to think like, I'm picking on them. But I know that it happens on both ends where a parent who the child may not live with, you know, may be kept away for whatever reason. There are
Yes.
fathers there are people who cannot go to the school and see their child. There are people who refuse, even through court orders.
Mm-hmm.
Their court orders are issued for parents to have a child every weekend, every other weekend, whatever it may be. And the parent who has the custody refuses to honor those court orders. So sometimes when we see this prevalence of single parenting, we have to also contextualize it to understand how or what people are classifying as single parents. Okay. I just had to put that out there because it is important that those single parents or who think that they are single parents, purposely, whatever, understand the value of the other parent. That
Mhm.
mother who may have custody of the child understand the value of having the father present, even if he may not have finances. Okay,
Yeah.
that
Still
to
valuable.
spend time, to take that child to the park, play, have homework, play football, cricket, even have a word of advice, especially as they go into teenage years and become young adults. You know, children remember more experiences than they remember money. Trust me, and
One can say
vice
what.
versa. And if a father has a child and the mother is unable to support for whatever financial reason, you know, that mother, there's always another way she can contribute to that child's life. Okay, so I want both parents to understand that while we may be talking about single parents and the impact on children, that it boils down to you, the parent, who have to bring yourself to the position to understand the role of the other parent, understand that everything you do is for the well-being of that child. That child should
So
be forefront, the reason for what you do, what you do.
so I am here with my eye on the clock and I realize that we are down to our final 15 minutes already, and I now feel as though we are scratching the surface of this discussion. One of the things that I want to jump in here and say is that the word intentionality becomes so important, whether
Mhm.
you have 6 children or one child. When you
Mhm.
realize that you are responsible for a child, I believe as parents, the onus is on us to determine what do we want for this child in the future. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, I remember saying to somebody when I was disciplining my son, and when I say discipline, it wasn't lashing at all. It was speaking to him about not doing something that he was doing that he shouldn't have been doing. And somebody passed me and said, he's just a little boy, you could let him do it. And then I said, no, I am not raising a boy. My husband and I, we are raising a man, because he will not
Yes.
always be a boy. So we
Mhm.
have to be intentional now about what we want this man to look like in
Mhm.
20 years, in 30 years. So it's tiring, but the effort has to be put in on
Mhm.
this end, whether it be one parent in the home, whether it be two parents in the home, whether it be an extended family and persons putting effort and finances. And I like the thing you said, I can't remember which of you said it, but experiences are so much more important sometimes than finance. And when I look back through
Mhm.
my own childhood, I think my dad died about three years ago, thereabouts. But one of the things I remember us doing is on Christmas mornings, we used to take a drive um, near to Arthur Seat, and there was a hill. And the big thing for us on Christmas morning was that my dad would drive so that we would almost drive over the hill and you feel that sinking sensation in your stomach. I am almost 50. And for me, that is an experience I will never forget. That's something, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up at all, but it was something that my father intentionally did. And I can say things from my mom. Last thing I'm going to put in here, because I want to get back to you two. We were talking about community and the free programs and so on. But I think an area that's untouched is the extracurricular activities at schools.
Mhm.
Persons are complaining about the fact that the number of students getting enrolled in Girl Guides and cadets and Duke of Edinburgh award schemes and so on, it seems to be declining. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a cultural thing, but that's
Mhm.
still another avenue for those persons who might not have the finances for extracurricular activities to use those that are provided by the schools. And I believe all secondary schools have extracurricular activities, and the primary schools have various activities as well. So, avail
Mhm.
yourself of those opportunities as well.
Mhm.
So, for those persons who unfortunately are now joining us after we've had all this discussion, we are talking about the impact on children, single parent home, and we heard Fabian talking about single parent home, and both gentlemen don't like that term, or dual parent home. And we've learned that it's not necessarily advantageous to be in a dual parent home, especially if it's toxic. So,
Mhm.
gentlemen, as we begin to wind down, what are the pressing things on your heart that you want to share with our audience with respect to making our children the best that they can be? Because our children are the ones that are going to end up taking care of us. And therefore, I would want somebody who I could trust to take care of me. So, what advice do you have for parents at this juncture now that we're having this very necessary discussion?
I'm gonna jump in here because Fabian said something about these support systems. Two things I would say. One of the things that they're looking at the data and they look at one of the new things they're looking at the wealth of support of fathers that are not in the home. So they're actually saying that men that are not in the home are tremendously more supportive in the child's life. There's this whole thing of being there, present, taking the things of being supportive in each other's life, even although they're not in the home. And they actually say they're actually starting to see this thing where the men are actually more supportive than the men that are in the home, which is interesting trending that we got to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years. One of the things I mainly am passionate about, I believe you should be something before you get there. Okay. God will prepare an environment before he places you in it. He'll
Okay.
place everything before he places in it. So many times I think we need to be prepared before. We should be a parent before you have a child. You should be a
Mhm.
mother before you have a child. You should be a father before you have a child. Which means that even if you don't have a child, you're still a mother, you're a father. You father people, you mother people. Some people have children and they never transition into mother or father. So it's very hard to be intentional to something that you know have to be almost feel forced to do because you found yourself in a situation. So therefore, when we talk about parenting and dual parenting and a healthy environment intentionality, we should be parenting, we should study parenting, understanding parenting. The wealth of information is out there. Once again, it takes the intentionality to understand what does that look like? What does pregnancy look like? What does first, second, third trimester looks like? What does postpartum depression look like? All those different things. What is the dynamic of the first 3 years of a child's life? We have so many different studies out there that we can read, which means by the time I have my child, I am studied in children. You know what I mean? And then I could personalize it to my life. And that's really intentionality that we're talking about. No longer do I believe that we should be ignorant um, anymore. I don't care about your academics. I know what school you went to. But I think the lack of intentionality of using the resources by the school, the churches, the community, if we dig, we're going to find it. And I think that's what I want parents to do. They have to be intentional in their lives.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. There's a verse in the Bible that speaks about the older women teaching the
Teaching the
younger
younger women
women.
how to love their husband, love their
And
children. Yes, please.
yes, and I think that goes just beyond spirituality.
Mm.
It
That goes for
goes,
everything.
yeah, it encompasses everything. And I believe that the same thing would be for men speaking to other men. successive generations should be better than the generation that went before, because the experiences in that generation should be poured into the generation underneath. So I shouldn't, in the ideal world, be falling prey to the same mistakes that I saw you making. Right, we learn through experience as well, and we learn through observation. Right,
Yes,
so
yes.
I totally agree with that. Well, I mean, you have to agree with the Bible, but that verse I think becomes important in parenting as well. You know, show somebody how to breastfeed, how to
Mhm.
mix formula, how to hold a child, how to
And that's my
manage.
things. I taught I did 2 sessions with the breastfeeding community in Barbados about 3, 4 years ago. 2 sessions a year. And as a man, I'm teaching breastfeeding, emotion intelligence and breastfeeding. And I'm saying that's I'm saying that we should not. And this has nothing to do with here I am, as I said, where did I come from? But I just think that that is nothing unique to me. That is something that we should be intentional about. I teach on perimenopause, postmenopause, endometriosis, PCOS, because we are a family. Women are my family, so therefore I educate myself on women so I can teach women.
Yes, make yourself better so that you can make others better.
Yes, please.
Fabian, let's hear from
Yeah.
you. What are your
Yes.
thoughts about how we can do better for our children?
Well, as it went down, I want to really just congratulate parents for doing a fantastic job. I mean, I know we beat up yourself, and I don't want parents to think that we're here to chastise you or anything. I think that this is really a learning experience where we share information, and I guess in the hopes that you can improve. There's always room for improvement, but before you're a parent, you're a person first. And I think that if parents start to focus on themselves as individuals, okay, how they deal with their own mental health, how they deal with their own emotional regulation, how they deal with their own communication, how they connect with their partners. I also want parents to also understand the importance of building relationships with their spouses. I think a lot of the quote unquote single parent issues is because people naturally they have not been taught how to sustain relationships. And I think once we start focusing on the individual, focusing on relationships, understanding how individuals change, and being able to be vulnerable, and all of these things that build you as an individual as part of your personal power, your personal leadership, then that dovetails into you becoming an excellent parent, because you cannot teach what you do not know. Children learn from what they see more so than what you tell them. And
Yes.
you have to reflect that in your whatever you want them to do, you have to reflect in your behavior. It is not going to be easy, especially for persons who may be parenting alone. You also have to be open to help, open to having to say, well, look, I need assistance. We are very proudful people. We don't like nobody to know your business. We don't want
Yes.
nobody to know when we got when the little boy in the house get in trouble, or the teenage boy feel he's a man, and he want to raise his
Hmm.
voice a little heavy. So we don't want nobody to know. If you are a parent, even as a man, you may have a daughter who may be going through her adolescent phase. And as we say, she thinks she's a woman now. Find a female that can connect with her on that level, because there are things about womanhood that we may would never know, and things about manhood that a woman would never know. So it is okay to ask for help. Understand that this again, the whole idea of the village, the whole idea that you do not have all the answers.
Yes.
Okay. And that is what I really like parents to note. And finally, the child. The child is the most important part of this equation. So if it is that you got man issues and woman issues, you vex with he vex with she, and all of that, understand the only person being hurt in this whole process is the child. And what we teach that child will manifest in their adulthood when they
Their
then
own.
become parents. So
Mhm.
when they become parents, a lot of the bad behaviors that you teach them, a lot of the toxic environment that you created for them, they will then replicate that for their own. So we as parents, we have a responsibility to do the best for our children.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. If I have to take away anything that you gentlemen would have shared this evening, is that the nomenclature, the naming it a single parent home and a dual parent home is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the environment that's created for these children. Another thing that we've learned in this journey that we've had over the past hour is the fact that intentionality is important. You have to determine what it is that you want for this child and that there are resources available, but we just have to ask. And one other thing that just popped into my mind is that what works for one family does not necessarily work for another family. And Fabian had just mentioned just now about sharing information, and we're very private people in Barbados. But we can get information from other persons, we can learn from other persons. But like you had said, St. Clair, we study, we learn as much as we can, and then we adapt what we have learned to suit our particular situation. So you might be a family that's on the road, up and down, you know, busy here and there and everywhere. So the sitting at the table and doing homework doesn't work for you. So you adapt. Or you might be the family that the children get home right after school, somebody's there and then they can sit down. So you adapt for you. But like both gentlemen have said, the most important thing is the child. So you've joined us this evening where we were having this discussion in Children's Week about single parent versus dual parent homes. And we've learned so much. Join us again in 2 nights' time. That's Thursday, the 23rd of July. And we are going to be discussing success stories. We had a little tidbit of a success story when we chatted with St. Clair about him coming from a single parent home. And he's turned out fairly okay. He credits his success to God, you know, all credit goes to God. By the way,
Thank you much.
Fabian, you're a single parent or dual parent, Fabian?
Is Fabian still there?
I am married with 2 children. So,
No, your
oh, yeah, I came
childhood
from?
home.
I've never known a home without both my mother and father. I've always had both parents.
Okay. Okay. So different
Yes, always.
experiences, but
Yes, correct.
still,
Yeah, yes.
so the environment. See, that is the environment. So gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for
You're
your
most welcome.
effort, Fabian, you know, joining under duress.
Yes,
Thank you so
please.
much. And it has been my pleasure sitting here and chatting with you. And I look forward to the time when we can do it again. Everyone, do have a pleasant evening. Good night.
Thank you.